Every C8 and Z06 should be available at MSRP at the top 50 Corvette dealerships across the nation. So if your local dealer isn't willing to play nice, let them know they lost your money and all future business for trying to scam you. The days of tolerating ADMs and markups is over. We are coming up on 2 months since my first video on the sales of the C8 Stingray and Z06. I said some controversial things to some folks in that video, and we're going to do more of that today. What's changed, and have the sales improved in the last 2 months? Mostly, they've gotten worse, but we're going to get into that and all the nuances of it. Additionally, we're going to get into the ordering as well as production changes that GM's implemented that's affecting supply and ultimately pricing. I may even have advice for getting a C8 Stingray or Z06 at MSRP sooner rather than later. Stick around to the end and I'll share all the details. Let's carve up this discussion into 2 different parts. First being the Z06s, and then second the C8 Stingrays. I'm going to lump the HTCs or hardtop convertibles into those groups, so we're not going to differentiate those. Since we're going to start things off with the Z06, we should talk about the warranty first. GM made the purchasers of the Z06s sign an agreement that said that if they sold the car within the first 6 months, they would null and void or cancel the warranty on those cars for all future owners. Never mind that that's completely insane, and I can't imagine ever signing anything like that. But I took a lot of flack from some of the folks saying that GM probably wouldn't honor that and all this kind of thing, but they went out of their way to make people sign these agreements, so you'd have to believe they were going to follow through with their intentions on that. All of that aside, now that we're past 6 months when these first started selling in December, these cars are going to come onto the used market. I believe that we're going to see that happen here real quick, and it's going to satiate some of the demand for the Z06s as well as drive the price down, as you can imagine, because supply is going to go up, prices are going to come down. Currently, prices are really high on the Z06, and I think that's going to continue for a little bit. But as we see more and more of these hit the used market, I think prices are going to start to fall on the lower option versions. So let's dig into some of those sales. Let's look at the sales chart on these Z06 sales on Bring a Trailer before we dig into the individual sales. So as I pull up this chart, you'll see that there's only about 10 sales and that they're way up there from a pricing perspective. These cars, when they sell, are getting well above MSRP still. The really high prices that are above 200, these are mostly the 70th anniversary spec, which is a really high spec, and it's a limited production car. Prices are mostly stable in what folks are bidding, but the majority of the used sales, I suspect, are coming soon. This chart and the sales will change quite a bit, I suspect, in the coming months as the used Z06s start to sell, which I mentioned earlier. Stick around to the end and I'll explain some other factors that are going to drive the prices down. Let's look at a couple Z06 sales to see what is and isn't selling. This first one is a doozy. This is a perfect example of dealer greed. This was a new Z06 being sold on Bring a Trailer, and this car had a $138,000 MSRP, and it was bid to $185,000, plus there's a $5,000 buyer's premium that goes along with that, so $190,000. That is quite a bit, and this dealer did not accept the price. You see here the bid went to $185,000. It did not sell. That's a $50,000 profit on a single sale, and that wasn't good enough for this dealer. This is despicable in my opinion. Next for the Z06 was this car, which is super sharp, and this one was offered at no reserve, so kudos to the seller on this. And it sold for $235,000, as you see, plus another $5,000, so $240,000 total. This was a 70th anniversary edition, which I mentioned earlier, and they're getting top dollar right now. It's higher spec and lower production numbers. So this is strong money and shows the Z06 can still get all the money. I don't consider the Z06 investment class necessarily, so don't make any mistake there. I believe that the regular Z06 is going to continue the drop and likely very soon, as you'll see, but maybe some of these limited editions will retain some value. And then I have a couple examples of things that potentially could maintain value going forward a little bit later on. That being said, there are some standout sales that are happening. So this one sold for 193,000. Remember, 5K more. So this sold for 198, almost 200 grand. So this was a spectacular sale. This car had an MSRP of 131,000. So this person made nearly 70K, 68 grand, and that's a pretty outstanding sale for a Z06 right now on the market. Now let's take a look at the C8 market and see what's happening with sales as well as what's happening with the market overall. Let me give you a hint. Prices are falling. Towards the end of the video, I'm going to give advice from a top 16 Corvette dealer and what he recommends people do if they're looking to buy right now. Also, if you're enjoying this content, please give me the thumbs up down below. We're going to take a look at some individual auctions and show you how prices have fallen over the last 6 months on very similar cars. So now we're going to start things off with individual auctions. I'm going to split the screen here and we're going to start off with a short trip in our time machine, if you will. And this is a car that sold in December of last year, and it was a highly optioned C8, and it was just 6 months ago that this sold, right? So this C8 highly optioned 3LT Z51, and it had the carbon bits on it and everything. The MSRP in 2020 was $93,000. And so with price hikes on it, this would be more expensive now. But you can see that this car went for 110 grand, including the premium. And this was a solid 15K over MSRP. And it's a sweet car. And you can see folks got excited about it with the bidding, and it really got bid up quite a bit. So now moving on to modern times, if you will, we're going to take a look at this similarly optioned 3LT Z51 spec car that's from 2023, and it had an MSRP of 91,000. So obviously it's not the same amount of options, but it's similar. It's missing the carbon bits, but it's still a very highly spec car. This car is the epitome of a car hysteria that happened in 21 and 22. This car is now looking for its third owner, and as you can see down here, it has a grand total of 81 miles on it. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but it's been bought and sold by car flippers, and in this case they paid 91,000 plus the buyer's premium plus shipping, and so they're into this thing for about $100,000, and it got bid up to a very respectable 85,000, almost MSRP if you include the buyer's premium into that, and it did not sell. Obviously, they're hoping to make at least $100,000, and it just didn't happen. My point on this is to compare it to the previous car that we just looked at, where it sold for 110,000 6 months ago, and this one for 90, and so that's a 20K depreciation in 6 months. This next car is another example of prices dropping fast. With an MSRP of around $96,000, this car was highly optioned. As you can see, it got bid up to about 91 grand if you include the buyer's premium in this, and this was just the other day. I'm not sure why the reserve was set so high on this car. It is used, right? I struggle to understand Bring a Trailer's logic on this reserve for this car. This was a 2022, and it had about 3,000 miles on it, as you can see here, a little less than 3,000 miles, and it didn't sell. What are they hoping for? So just like the previous car, if we remember back to the car that sold in December, that was a similar spec, this car has essentially dropped $20,000 in value, right?
Am I right, or am I right? Or am I right?
And here's another auction that we have that's a 23 car. So this just happened, and with buyer's premium, it was bid up to MSRP, and it did not sell. This is a 2023 model with only 38 miles on it, if you take a look here. So people are just not willing to pay over MSRP for C8s right now, especially used ones. So there's a lot of folks out there crying in their cereal right now, and if they're car flippers, it couldn't make me happier.
Can you make yourself cry?
The pricing is coming down quick, and thankfully it's returning to normal levels. And I say thankfully because I think it's unfortunate that a car that's billed as every man's sports car from GM essentially got priced out of reach of many folks because of the hysteria in 21 and 22, as well as the car flippers and the dealerships trying to mark these cars up. All right, now let's take a look at the sales trends on the C8 Stingrays. So I'm going to switch over to this chart here and I'm going to explain it a little bit first. So this chart has excluded the Z06 as well as the C8R and the anniversary edition just because they're anomalous from a pricing perspective. So I just wanted to have this kind of centered in on these cars. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the overall sales of the lifetime and see what the trends are. So if you look at this for the lifetime, there's about 32% of the time they're not selling on Cars and Bids as well as Bring a Trailer, and that's a little bit above average but not completely out of line. If we look at just the last year, so I'm going to change the recency here to the last year, and you'll see that there's a little bit more no sales just in the last year, and so this is actually 37%. Now it won't let me do this, but if I put the limit here at just this calendar year, 60% of all C8s are not selling. And that is a phenomenal number. As you've seen, it's really because the reserves are being unrealistic and well above MSRP from what I can gather. When they correct the reserves, these cars are going to sell again on here. And I'm just going to jump over to show you what it's looking like on Cars and Bids, and you'll notice that the cars are selling in the 60s and 70s. So a little bit more realistic. Cars and Bids is selling better now than Bring a Trailer because the reserve prices are lower. If I were you and I wanted a used C8 right now, I would be on Cars and Bids and I'd be looking at them on there because the reserve prices are more reasonable. Now let's take a look at some spicy information on supply as well as a dealer recommendation. First, let's touch on the quarterly report that GM just had in Q1, where they said that for quarter over quarter that there was a 10% sales drop in C8 Corvettes. If you add to that, there was also some recent reports from C8 Tracker. I'm going to put the link below in the description to the data that I'm showing you right now, but it shows that production has changed recently. The C8 production has went down 6.5% this past week, and Z06 production is ramped up 12.5%. Overall, there's a change in production as Z06s were in very short supply. So ramping these numbers up should help satiate the backlog for demand on the Z06s a little. There were 59 Z06s shipped to one dealer. In one of the auctions on Bring a Trailer, there was a top 16 Corvette dealer who went on to say a few things around the ordering process. And he stated that because of the changes in the ordering process, which we're going to talk about in a second, as well as supply changes, he feels that any customers who want a Z06 will be able to get a Z06 in 2024. He also stated that the best way to get one right now is to go to one of the top 50 Corvette dealers in the nation. I'm going to show you some graphics of C8 Tracker as well as Corvette Blogger where they have the list of the top 50 dealers, and if you visit those you can get a Z06 or C8 at MSRP, and that should not be a problem. He did mention that the fastest way to get a Z06 or C8 in this case is to get one that the dealer has already ordered and put in place, and so that's going to be the fastest way. If you wanted to make a custom order to get it exactly the way that you wanted, that's not going to be the fastest way anymore. Speaking of ordering, there's been some changes to that system put in place by GM. Mostly it was put in place so that the dealers could not manipulate the allocation system. And so it hurts the customer a little bit, in my opinion, but it's helping out the system overall so that people can get cars and there isn't these excessive ADMs as much anymore. Previously, if you placed an order with a dealer, that would get priority in the system. But like I said, some of the dealers were reportedly manipulating that system to get more allocation. And so that's been taken off the table. What it means to the consumer right now is that you'll probably get a car faster, but it won't be exactly what you want because you're going to have to accept what that dealer has ordered. So in this case, the best way to get what you want is probably shop around on that whole list of top 50 Corvette dealerships that are out there, and then you can find one that's very similar to what you want, and then you may actually get it sooner because it's already in process. So what's the summary of this information? From a C8 Stingray perspective, basically we have supply catching up with demand, if you will. And so they've been out for a few years, and we've seen now that there's a 10% drop in sales from the GM perspective in Q1. That's probably going to continue in Q2 as that's going to come out here before too long. And so prices are going to continue to fall, and the C8 Stingrays are going to drop into what I would consider a normal used car market where we have depreciation and cars are going to drop when you drive them off the lot. Now, from a Z06 perspective, I think that we are ramping up production from what we've seen earlier, and that is going to satisfy some of the demand. Per the dealer that I mentioned earlier, he's thinking that people will be able to get any car that they want from a Z06 perspective in 2024, so we still have a little bit of backlog there. That's his prediction, but I'll go with it for now. It sounds reasonable. The higher end Z07 packages, as well as the 70th anniversary and the track packs, those cars are going to be in high demand and they're low production. I think the Z07 package is only 5% of the Z06 line, and so those are going to be very rare. Those prices in the limited models are probably going to be at, near, or around, or maybe even above 200,000 going forward, and so those will still be high, but the lower option Z06s, those should drop pretty quickly. Every C8 and Z06 should be available at MSRP at the top 50 Corvette dealerships across the nation. So if your local dealer isn't willing to play nice, let them know they lost your money and all future business for trying to scam you. The days of tolerating ADMs and markups is over. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you enjoyed this content, please give me the thumbs up button as well as hit subscribe, and you'll get notifications for community polls that we have coming up where we're going to vote on content for the future. Also, you'll get notifications when all that new content comes out. And with that, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one.